everybody. Welcome to Craig Cast. I'm Craig Coshun along with James Stewart. Great to have you with us. This is our first podcast, videocast, Craig Cast that we are doing here. And we're good friends, James and I. James, how you doing, my man?
Doing well. Excited about this new endeavor we've taken on. Good place for us to kind of chat and throw ideas off of each other. Should be fun.
So James and I have worked together for well over 10 years now. James produces most of our pregame and postgame programming and some special feature shows that we have done on our network line covering the Bucks and the Brewers. And it was his idea to say, you know what, we should get in on this podcasting and talking sports, especially for the two teams that we're covering in Milwaukee, the Brewers and the Bucks. And I thought, well, let's give it a shot. So we've been rehearsing every now and again, and we thought, you know what, I think we can pull this off. So good luck to you, James, that you're actually bringing me on board and trailing me along in your endeavors, my man.
I just figured there's no way the people have had enough Craig Coshun. There's no way.
Right. Well, they haven't gotten enough of you, that's for sure. Just for, I think people know my background a little bit because I have the advantage of being in the state for as long as I have and covering as much as I have over decades, by the way, not just years. So give us a little intro on your background. And I know you grew up here and stuff, and covering sports in this state means a lot to you.
Yeah, grew up here, local team fan and pretty much every team. Had the pleasure of working kind of in the Brewers clubhouse. I've worked with the Bucks obviously for the last 10 years. So I've just been around Wisconsin sports for a while, and happy to kind of give my 2 cents.
Well, I mean, you've got a lot to offer, that's for sure, because our shows aren't just something we show up for. I mean, I'm pretty certain a lot of people know that by now, but the depth that you go into as well, and the numbers and the subject line. I mean, we're doing this because we just kind of want to share some ideas, share some opinions, and that's kind of an extension of what our regular jobs are. So I know that's what I'm looking forward to here, and I know
Definitely.
You're probably thinking the same thing.
For sure. Yeah, it should be fun. It should be fun. We've got good teams, so it's kind of the perfect time to an easy time to get in and talk about it, I guess.
Yeah, for sure.
Let's
start with the Bucks. So we're picking them up this week, and they're 3-1 out of the gates. And they had a dismal loss on that first game of that 3-game road trip in Miami. But they bounced back really nicely in San Antonio. And then on Monday night in Indianapolis, they took care of business really pretty good. They grabbed the lead, and I think midway through the second quarter, and the Pacers never got within 5 after the Bucks were up by 18. So I guess the first thing that stands out to me that I think I'd like us to talk about is like the alarm kind of is going off, like this team is really, really good, and just winning this championship a few months ago was certainly no fluke. They have come out of the gates in a fashion that I don't think that I was quite expecting them to play this well.
Yeah, and there was, opening night, there was no kind of championship hangover. It was even, despite the fact that they're getting their rings and all the emotion there, it was right back to business. I mean, I think that all kind of starts with Giannis and his mentality. He's said it, a lot, that he just tries to focus on the present, and it's clear that that's the team motto now, and I think that the winning the championship allowed them to take a little bit of weight off their shoulder, but we still went into the offseason and came out of the offseason somehow as the underdogs. So it's like they're kind of mentally right where they were, fighting their way back up, and at least nationally as the underdogs with all the stuff going around the Nets and whatnot. But what do you think has been kind of the biggest surprise from that aspect of just picking up where they left off?
No, I think to me, I think it's been just a different type of swagger and it's I think it's clear in Giannis. I think it's really clear in Chris Middleton. I think it's really clear in Pat Connaughton, even Jordan Nwora. And that swagger is not it's not an ego thing in a bad way. It's an ego thing in a good way. Like, we won this thing,
Right.
and we're coming back to win more. And you can just tell just by their attitude, they're grateful they won a championship, but I think they're even more grateful that they won a championship because they know collectively they can go
Right.
out and do it multiple times. And I think that's the thing. Like, we haven't covered a championship in this state, outside of the Packers. I mean, in this city for 50 years, and none of us covered that championship 50
Right.
years ago for the Bucs, and it wasn't anything like they're playing now and the hype and whatnot. So I think swagger, can change over time, and I think this is a good swagger. That's what I'm seeing with this team right now. It's a confident one. And, I think a lot of people share that. Like, what are you seeing, from your perspective? What's opening up your eyes first and foremost?
I think kind of going off of what you were talking about with the swagger, I think for me, Pat Connaughton seems to have – I'm starting to wonder, like, is playoff Pat the new Pat Connaughton? Is that what he is now?
Yeah.
Because there's been a definite step up from regular season to the playoffs. But to start this season, he's still hitting big shots. He's still getting the rebounds. He's still very active. And that's – to me, that's what is most – I guess not surprising, but most encouraging is that it's not just Giannis, Chris, Drew that have earned this swagger. It seems the whole team has, you know what I mean? And it's trickling down to the new guys there as well, that they kind of, the way they carry themselves.
Well, and I think part of that is there's so many guys that have come back.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a team that, is returning, most of its core. I mean, look, PJ Tucker is probably the only guy that I can possibly think of that, they're missing as far as championship level and what they got every single night, every single
Right.
game during that playoff run. How many teams can say that? I mean, how many teams can really say that when they come back? Most championship teams have lost an enormous amount of their
Right.
core. It just happens. Bobby Portis comes back for basically a hometown pay cut. I mean, stuff like that just doesn't happen when you're in your prime and you're 26 years old, and he hasn't even played yet.
Right.
I mean, part of the topic line here is the Bucs do have a lot of injury concerns. Drew's played like a game and a half. Lopez played one game. Bobby Portis hasn't played yet. Rodney Hood finally played his first game yesterday. They still have, and Dante's still going to be out for a while. So they're playing at a really good level right now. But I mean, we know who's leading the way, and that's Middleton and Giannis right now, each and every night.
Well, and that's kind of like the thing that we've come to be able to depend on for sure is Middleton and Giannis. But that I think last night was kind of the prime example, was they did a bulk of the scoring, but you got it kind of everywhere. You got Grayson Allen, you got Pat Connaughton. Jordan only had, I think, 9 points. 9 points, but a couple blocks. So you're seeing the activity everywhere. And I think Bud's got to be happy with that. The fact that you've got big guys down, you've got Holiday out, you've got Portis and Lopez. They haven't had Dante for a while, but still there's a lot missing in 3-1. It's got to be encouraging.
Well, yeah. And I think, watching yesterday's game, I think it was disappointing to learn that, Drew continues to have some foot problems right now. So he played in the first quarter of game one, played in that game against the Spurs, and then he was out yesterday. Now, look, at this point, so early in the season, they're being very cautious with guys, and we understand that. But the fact that, here's the other thing, James, I think we were really concerned on would Giannis even start the season suiting up and playing, considering that knee injury he had, against the Hawks in the Eastern Conference Finals. I mean, then he's back. He's leading the way. He's playing every night. He's playing 30 to 40 minutes a game. He's doing his thing in the lane. He hasn't changed one bit, but he's the one leading the way, and Middleton's right behind him. So I think when you have that kind of that swagger I'm talking about, I mean, how can't you, as Grayson Allen, who wasn't even on this team, it looks like he's a perfect fit for these guys. He's coattailing these guys big time, and it's working out. So is Wara. Wara's experience, in the Olympics, what he's doing on the defensive end right now. To me, that would be like one of the next top 3 stories for this team right now. Is I didn't think he was going to be as legit this quick, but he seems like he's made leaps and bounds.
Yeah.
And he's like right there.
Well, and he didn't necessarily play too much during the championship run, but he is coming off of 2 big stages. So, the moments shouldn't be too big for him anymore. Not to say that they were before, but we've seen just kind of some basketball maturity from him. Just hustle, defense, rebounding. And, Chris and Giannis talked about it post-game last night. And obviously a couple of days ago, Drew said he was kind of an early or a young Chris Middleton, which when you kind of think about it, makes a little bit of sense. A shooter who isn't necessarily over athletic, but big, can probably play 2, 3, 4 if needed. But again, a shooter. So kind of thinking about it after he said it, it's a very hopeful comparison, but perfect comparison,
Well, yeah, and I think coming from a guy like Drew too, if you read between the lines, Drew's probably also letting us know that he's working with this kid a little bit, and he cares a little bit about this kid.
For sure.
Drew's one of the very first guys that's going to say he wants as much improvement for this team as possible, as many good chances for this team as possible, because it is about the team. And I think that's the other thing that we were hearing so much about this championship team and their return early in the season is it is all about them collectively. And, if you we see, Brook Lopez, working with some of the young bigs that the Bucks have put out there too. He hasn't played much. Lopez hasn't, but he's right there helping out. Yeah. I mean, it's amazing to see this stuff. It's sitting right in front of our camera lens, turn the game itself, let alone who knows what's happening in practice.
Well, and he's got to be the world's biggest cheerleader because he's kind of one of those personalities too that has no problem getting involved, no problem speaking, and you see him on the sideline. He's animated, he's involved, and it really is. It's fun to see these guys have fun together. They seem to. The core of this team has been together for a while. So those relationships are obviously solid, but the way that they kind of welcome guys in has been cool too. Drew's only been there for not even a year yet, right? I mean, probably a calendar year about, but he's fit in seamlessly, and they are a lot of quiet, nice guys, but hopefully they kind of learn from that postseason that, maybe PJ Tucker and Bobby Portis are kind of credited for this, but they have a little nasty too now. And it's cool that they can kind of balance that with the amount of fun that they have.
I agree. I think the other thing, that they're overcoming some early season injuries here right now. And I think one of the topic lines that maybe I wasn't quite expecting, but you should expect is the fact that, the Bucks are playing with a target on their back.
Yeah.
Is it as severe as the Nets are playing with a target on their back or the Lakers are playing with a target on their back? Probably not. In fact, I would say, in my opinion, definitely not.
Right.
I think those are the 2 teams in the league that every single night, because they're probably hated by teams, in a good way, hate, not a bad.
Right.
But I don't think teams hate the Bucks. I think they want to beat Giannis because they know he's one of the best, if not the best player in the league.
Right.
They're the champions. But I don't fully embrace that they've got this big target on their back every single night, because I haven't seen it every single night in the first
Right.
4 games. Miami maybe, but it was their season opener, their home opener. You know, PJ scored all the points he's going to score all season long in that first game. I mean, and that's not a knock against him.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at PJ Tucker. His latest box was like 36 minutes and no points. So, you know, you got to take that with a grain of salt. But I'm not seeing. I understand the theory, and yes, I think it exists, but I don't think it's as big a target as still some other teams in the league. What do you think?
Yeah. I think it's interesting because one for the Heat, for example, Tyler Hero said after the game that they felt embarrassed from last year. So that, you know, that is totally understand why they come out so hot. And obviously that PJ Tucker addition and kind of how he felt about not coming back. But I think you kind of have to think about this in 2 different ways as far as their target. Like the Nets and the Lakers have this target of being the de facto champions.
Yeah.
The Bucks kind of have this different target in that they're nationally, I feel like they're kind of disrespected. And I feel like the target for them is that you want to prove them wrong, as to say that they're not really that good. Because I think a lot of people nationally, for sure, look at that championship as, you know, the injuries this, injuries that, whatever. Fact is, you're still the champion. But it feels like, and maybe this is just my own small market kind of narcissism, but it feels like they want us to know that the Bucks aren't that good. And the Bucks go out there and obviously prove everyone wrong. But that's where I feel like it's different between the Nets and the Lakers, at least nationally and fan base wise. But I think that everyone does know that the Bucks are a great team. I think it also, you look at it in the same way that you look at kind of the ranking of the top 3 players. How often does the champion, finals MVP, and finish with a 50-point game be listed as second or third best in the league? This just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like if look how fast Kawhi shot up. All of a sudden Kawhi was the best player in the league. You know, when the Warriors won, Curry's the best player in the league, or Durant's the best player in the league. We know if LeBron wins, LeBron is the best player in the league, without question. But in this instance, little Milwaukee, Giannis is 2 or 3. And we're talking more about a second round game by Kevin Durant. Like that's the last time we saw Kevin Durant play out of his mind. The last time we saw Giannis play out of his mind was a championship. You know
so
what I mean?
I love that because it's just flat out true. And that's so that's why there's a target back there, but it might be more of a silhouette or something like that.
Yeah.
It's
not the normal target. Yeah.
It's not red and white with a big target in the middle. You're not getting 50 extra points for hitting that if you're playing against the Bucks. You're just
Definitely.
not. And that's that. But here's the thing, though. Does that make a difference to this team? They're not playing like it. Did that make a difference to this team at any point last year during the regular season when they said, we don't necessarily have to be the number one seed and have home court advantage to win a championship? We're better than that. All we need to be doing is playing our best basketball, be healthy as much as we can during a playoff run and play our style. And guess what? That's exactly what won it for this team. And that's what we're seeing right out of the gate here. But it's even at a more confident level. It's almost like they rubber stamped how they won a championship last year. And they've told the rest of the league, if you want a blueprint, here it is. You don't have to do what the Lakers are doing and putting, the oldest team with some of the most successful players that are out of their prime all together on one team. And kind of the same thing, with the Nets. Maybe their top 3 are a little bit younger than what the Lakers are touting out there. But they're still trying to jam a big foot in a small shoe, in my opinion.
Right. And the Bucks are kind of the old school model. They are, I guess you would classify them as having a big three, but their team is built on continuity, on pieces that make sense. It seems like ever since the Heat, the LeBron Heat, the super team was just find the three best players you can get and put them together. We don't care how they fit. They'll figure it out. And the Bucks have been that whole time building continuity, and obviously paid off in the long run. But I think that's the two different models that you're looking at here. And one of them is more realistic for small markets, and the other is the big market route, like LA, Miami. You can do that in those towns.
Right.
We can't do that in Milwaukee. So we and we have the perfect star to do it, obviously. But yeah, that's what the difference of those teams are. And I think nationally and fan base wise, that's kind of the reaction to it. Which one do you like? Do you like Chris Middleton, who maybe took 8 years to become an all-star? Or do you like the all-stars put together from day one? Which one do you prefer? I prefer this one. I prefer the Bucks.
Because they built it. They built it. They created their own team. It is old school. It's we've seen this with the Milwaukee Brewers this year too, and well, not just this year, but in recent years here to get to the level that they are here right now. They're not a championship level yet. We know that. We'll talk about that in a minute, but it's the same thing, and that's what you do. John Horst, David Stearns, they don't want to hear that we're in a small market. The ownerships for each team don't want to hear small market talk, but I mean, we can say what we want. They can say what they want. We're a small market. And whether it's a financial thing or notoriety thing or respect thing, I mean, it exists and it's never, ever going to go away. It's been here for the history of sports. So that's just the way it is right now.
You can't argue with the outcome. I mean,
no.
Not only do you and I appreciate it, but obviously a full stadium and 60,000 plus also appreciated it. So, it's kind of not to harp on the small market thing, but it is kind of the identity of pretty much all the teams in the state. It's to build. Yeah.
Well, and I think it's the same thing, as we transition to a big game coming up on Thursday night for the Packers. We want to talk a little Packer talk here too. You got a 6-1 Packer team that's firing pretty good on all cylinders against Arizona 7-0. And they seem to be the new up and coming, quick rising team to Super Bowl prominence perhaps. And they are good. But the Packers, all of a sudden, James, now you got Devontae Adams, who has tested positive for COVID.
Yeah.
And now there's a huge threat, since this is a Thursday game and not a Sunday game, that he's not going to play. And I find this somewhat amusing that, and I'm sure you did the same thing this morning. You're watching some of these talk shows on the networks, and they're like, Green Bay's best player is going to be out. They have no chance to beat Arizona. And I'm thinking, is Aaron Rodgers out of the game?
Right.
Who is the best player on the Packers right now? And I'm not saying Adams doesn't rate. He's the best receiver. He's the best offense. He's the second best player on this team, though, isn't he?
Yeah. And that's the thing. The Packers, much like the Bucks, I mean, they have a ton of injuries, ton on the defensive side. And so I think that there's really, what are you going to do about it, right? Aaron's got to go out and spread the ball out. We saw last week that Lazard got involved and Tunyon got involved. So it's not that they don't have weapons, but it's obviously they are at a disadvantage with all the injuries and no Adams, but you still have Aaron Rodgers. So, you still got to feel good going into it. You have the better quarterback. Kyler he's very good, but he's not Aaron Rodgers.
No, and Aaron Rodgers, look, outside of that first game in Jacksonville, which clearly turned out to be a preseason game in the mind of number 12, since he never played in a preseason game this year. He sat out. Protect the injury. You got to respect that. NFL seasons, they increased it by games. They're playing 17 games this year. You're going to lose some games along the way. To strategically choose to lose game one, if you will, and then know that it is kind of interesting. But who else, and I'm not putting this guy on any bigger and higher of a pedestal than he's already done for himself or Packer fans have. I mean, that's all great. I get it. But the dude does have a plan in his head, and you just don't know it sometimes until the game unfolds. So I'm thinking to myself, they've missed some games without Adams. If I saw this stat right, he has missed 6 games in his career, and guess what the Packers' record is? 6-0.
Oh,
so
really?
they have figured out a way. He has missed much, but it is interesting that they are 6-0 when he misses games. So okay. So I'm not ruling out Thursday. I'm going to be hyped up. There's no Bucs game that night.
Right.
There's the activity that you and I will be sitting in front of the couch. We'll be sipping and having a good time, right? Parties, whatever. That's what the state of Wisconsin should still be doing on Thursday night, whether Adams plays or not. If 12's on the field, they still have a legitimately good shot at pulling something off. And if they scheme and do things right and make adjustments, who knows, right?
Right. And I mean, Randall Cobb hasn't had a huge game yet. Well, he had the couple touchdowns, but there's still kind of a lot of familiarity for Aaron. Like it's not that he throws to Adams a lot, but it's not like these other guys aren't running routes either. You're still an NFL team with NFL receivers, and you have one of the best quarterbacks in the game and a good run game. So it might change the game plan a little bit, but I don't think there's any need to panic and just assume it's a loss.
No, and they Adams has as many catches as everybody else on the team right now. So, to me, it still opens the door. I mean, just that's how this works. It opens the door. You still got to play the game. And I hope he can make it back, but it seems a little bit unlikely here. So, and that's life in the big city. What do you do? So it's still,
and it's week 7. So there's plenty of time. And if anything else, it's a good game for a Lazard or a Tunyon to go off and rebuild that chemistry kind of that they had last year. So, I'm sure that we've seen Aaron Jones have 4 touchdown games. So it's not like they're going in there with no weapons.
No, and I think, if you look at the Packers too, and you look at what they've done over the last, there's the 6-game winning streak too. I think that there's definitely the continuity on offense is building and getting better. And I think the defense, I mean, you talk about the Bucs overcoming some injuries right now. It's like one by one, the Packers are losing some key guys. They've done a nice job, not just filling in though, but I think they've taken, those steps you want to keep taking with these guys, and things are improving along the way. However, Joe Barry, their defensive coordinator, won't be there because he's also tested positive for COVID as well. So there's some things to overcome here. There's no question about that. You're not gonna be hearing the voice. You're not gonna be, being led this week and stuff, because he's not allowed to be there. But they are doing what we're doing. They are, doing the Zooms and having their meetings still with people. So hopefully that'll still work out. But defensively, they've hung in there pretty nicely, I think.
Yeah, and it's been kind of patchwork on defense. Obviously when Jair Alexander went down, and Kevin King, there was a lot of what's going to happen. But we saw Stokes is stepped up and played the way that he needs to play. And I think it's all going to be a little bit of patchwork and making sure that, guys cover each other, that integrate the new linebackers that seem to pop up every week. I don't even know who is in their linebacking core at this point, but rotating door and they keep winning. So hopefully more of the same.
Well, I think, maybe a final thought on the Packers here too, James. They're in the last couple of weeks, you look at their schedule, and they did make a nice run here, 6-0. Now, the next 3 weeks, you've got the short week at Arizona. They've got the best record in the league, and that's a road game. And then you get, 9 or 10 days between games. But your next game's a road game at Kansas City. They're the surprisingly biggest disappointment in the league.
Yeah.
Mahomes isn't playing up to par. Nobody on that team is collectively right now. They're at a pace now where they're not even going to come close to making the playoffs, which is a shocker. And then you got Seattle after that. And Russell Wilson probably won't be playing in that game because of the broken finger and stuff. So now you're kind of looking at this saying, this is going to be the toughest stretch of the season, perhaps, for the Packers. But is it? Now, you're probably not going to have your best receiver. You're not going to have your defensive coordinator on the short week against the best team right now in the league. I say be as competitive as you can and cross your fingers, hope there's no more injuries coming out of Thursday. And then you rest up and you look at those other 2 games I'm talking about and you say, well, those are actually kind of winnable now.
Right. And if you take those, even if you lose this one and take those 2, you're looking at 8-2.
Right. Versus a threat. Well, maybe they could lose all 3 of those games, right? If Kansas City's playing right and Wilson's playing for Seattle.
Right. And I don't think if you're upset about 8-2, then you're not being an honest fan. It's still the NFL. You know what I mean? We just look at the Bengals game. They could have lost that game. I mean, there's still a lot of, I guess you would say, good fortune and luck going their way. So, anything could happen on Thursday. Yeah.
By the way, I've heard you complain about 8-2 records before. So,
well, I want a perfect record.
Of course.
That's what a fan does.
Going 82-0 after they won their first game against the Nets.
I think part of being a fan is having the ability to complain about the things that you shouldn't probably complain about. We're the championship team and we're still going to complain.
Since we're all smiles right now, I'm just going to do one more Packer topic here.
Yeah.
And I think, watching these games, it's kind of been brought up over the last couple of weeks. And I think especially, and I'm zeroing in on Aaron Rodgers here. The Bears, I own you statement he made after running and scoring that touchdown. And then this guy has been kind of all smiles and winning obviously makes that easy to do. We talked about the Bucks having a championship swagger now. He hadn't won a championship in 10 or 11 years. He's only won one. He has a different swagger about him right now too. Are you sensing that maybe he's actually having fun and he's not crabby old man halfway through some of these games like we've seen in the last few years?
I wonder too, as a fan and for us, it was terrible, the offseason. But maybe it was something that he needed to do. Maybe it was something that he needed to come out and voice his frustrations, and that kind of set him free clearly he's at a point where he feels like he can say and do whatever he wants. And maybe that's kind of put him back in his comfort zone of feeling and acting like the best quarterback in the league. Clearly the team responded. They brought back Randall Cobb, and he's said that they've had better conversations. So, maybe all that was necessary for a relationship that had gone on for a very long time and kind of changed guard halfway through. And he's got this young coach and young GM or not young GM, but, new GM. And maybe that was the necessary thing for him to get his swagger back. Cause you definitely do see it. And you definitely, maybe it's something that we're paying attention to more than previous years, but it seems like the camera is catching a lot of smirks and winks and,
Yeah.
And I think obviously the relationship with Devontae and kind of being declared the best, if not, one of the best, if not the best receiver in the league the last year. Maybe that's all kind of the swagger that is needed to remind them, how good they are.
I think we're seeing a team that from top to bottom seems to be all in. Shocker.
Right.
The acquisitions they've made to help plug some holes and to say we can be better, especially obviously defensively we're talking about here. But that's a good thing. And you know what? If that's what he's wanted all these years and they're finally giving it to him and they're kind of all in saying we can win this thing, that does bring a smile to a guy's face, maybe a little bit more in that case. That's for sure.
I don't know. Did you see what Tom Brady had to say about the whole "I own you" thing?
Yeah, refresh my memory though.
So I guess he was on a podcast and he congratulated Aaron Rodgers for being apparently a shareholder of the Chicago Bears. So it's kind of funny that you don't necessarily see that from Brady much either. At least not that kind of their relationship seems to have become more of a public thing in the last year or two, which I think is kind of interesting. And maybe some of that is the reason Aaron feels so good. He's obviously gotten a lot of public respect. So it's just kind of a funny story that I thought was interesting that Tom Brady went out and made that comment.
Well, Tom Brady has been he was on the Manning's version of Monday Night Football last night. I mean, he's popping up everywhere. And I wouldn't be surprised to see, Aaron Rodgers start popping up a little bit like that as well. He's probably not as out there, but you could also argue being Jeopardy and all the commercials and all, that he actually is. But I think that's a good thing. I mean, these are two guys that are pretty close in age and have had, high success. Tom Brady's had the highest level success. Right. You could count on probably 3 fingers, guys, maybe a hand of guys in history that have won as many championships as he has. But I think it's a good thing. This is a day and age where look what we're doing here for the first time. We're doing our podcast for the first time. It's out there. People want to hear what you have to say, and I think it's great that both these guys are doing it. Maybe Tom Brady can pull a little bit more out of Aaron Rodgers.
It's just two old guys having fun.
Just 2 old cranky guys. So we got 1 old cranky guy and 1 younger guy here on this one, but you're cranky too sometimes. By the way,
from time to time. Depends how much you're listening to me.
Exactly. Well, you've locked your kids out of your room, so that'll make you less cranky for an hour.
Yeah, they're coming. Don't worry.
I know it. I can hear that engine starting to steam up over there at the Stewart household. All right, one final thought here before we close out today. Talking a little Brewer baseball here right now. The Brewers make a pretty significant move that probably needed to be done. Andy Haines, their hitting coach, they let him go. Their offense was just not good for most of the year, unfortunately. They had some runs. Their pitching carried them. We all know that at this point. Andy's a good guy, known him for a while, very well liked around the league. It's certainly one of those cases where you don't want to see guys being fired, but they need a different voice. They need to hear some different things. Whatever coaches provide along that way, the bottom line, James, is hitters got to hit.
Yeah.
And you keep hearing, Yelich and Hero, great hitters. They can't forget. They can't just not hit, or they can't forget to hit. These guys seem to have forgotten how to hit here in the last year or two, which is crazy to think of.
And it's weird because you see it in spurts. Like they have these moments of hotness where it's 2-3 a week, two weeks of hot baseball, but they went cold at the end. And I feel like looking back on it, it started with that home series against the Cardinals. And it just felt like when they got swept, it felt like we knew we were still going to clinch, but it felt like something was taken out of it.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure what it is, because they had, Adames had his moments, Garcia had his moments, Urias had his moments at the plate, but largely not having Christian Yelich be Christian Yelich is tough, and it's just, I think you're right. New voice, you got to change something. You got to try something, because you can't keep coming back with the same approach if it's not coming up in the big moments.
Yep, and so they'll have to regroup. They're not only going to have to regroup, from who's going to be, the coaching staff leader of that offense, but they're also going to have to regroup to try to figure out, now that Andy Haines isn't there, he's not going to be working with Christian Yelich anymore, and their relationship goes way back. Now, who comes in and who does that? Who's going to be the voice of reason to, turn these guys around, and will they have the trust? I think that's where this hire is such a key, because there's so much untapped, not just potential. I mean, we're talking about an MVP and a hitter like Hira that shouldn't be batting 200 or lower here right now, and have lost their ability to drive the ball, that type of thing. This is going to be a big job for whoever comes in.
Definitely, and specifically with Hira, the easy thing would be to just say, well, was moving to first base really that tough, and that kind of cascaded? But ultimately, he was a hitter, and Yelich, obviously, we know what he was. This is MVP. So yeah, you like to think that it's not just a voice and there's something mechanical, but baseball is an interesting sport. We know that it's micro, kind of micro changes that make huge differences, with guys at the plate and an approach and mindset or whatever it is, and we're also in a new world, as far as we've even heard Giannis the MVP talking about seeing a sports psychologist and stuff like that. So it could be so many things, and yes, it's going to be a big job for the new hitting coach to kind of get this all right.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we'll be tracking it. This is our first podcast called Craig Cast with James Stewart, Craig Coshun. We really appreciate everybody watching, feedback. We certainly hope to be on at least once a week. If we get our act together and there's big stuff going on, maybe we'll be on a couple times a week. But we're wide open right now, and we got through our first one, James.
We did it. We did it.
All right, so look for us at least midweek from this point forward, and we certainly got a lot to talk about in this great state, especially what's happening in Milwaukee right now between the Bucks and the Brewers. Brewers have a big off season of planning and stuff, so it'll be fun to track what they do, and don't forget about some awards coming up with Corbin Burns as well. So we'll be tracking all that as well. So thanks for watching our first edition, number 1